Well, this is our last series, and I hope you gentlemen enjoyed some of the things that we learned from different gentlemen. And the speaker today will be our last speaker, but not only last, probably our oldest. I think, Paul, you say you're 101, right?
Oh,
Give or take.
And it's kind of interesting, just last month, Dave Poole and I were talking, and originally we were supposed to have Dave Binga speaking today, and he had the opportunity to get away on a vacation. And so before that happened, Dave said, Google said, well, what if we couldn't get Dave Binga? And I said, well, on my short list, I have Paul Douglas. And sure enough, I need to call him. I go, Paul, what are you doing on this day, on May 19th? He said, nothing. I said, well, we got the men breakfast. Are you available? I go, I'll take it. And he was in Ohio. I go, what are you doing in Ohio? And he said, well, I'm helping out one of his grandkids, and this was kind of fun. He said, you know, the next day I'm going to be on the roof helping out. Now this guy is 91 years old, and he planned to be on the roof helping out his grandkids. Kind of remind me of the story of a couple who had no kid, and the mother-in-law moved in, and the wife was on the road all the time, and she decided to call in the shed on them from time to time, and she called in and said, the husband answered the phone and said, well, how's the cat doing? And the husband said, well, the cat's dead. Dead? What do you mean the cat's dead? What you old men are like? What do you mean dead, dead? Why can't you just call me the first time and just tell me the cat's on the roof, and then call me back later and tell me that the fire department showed up, and then call me back the third time and tell me they're working on the cat, and maybe on the fourth call you can tell me that the cat what the cat having, but no, all you gentlemen are saying the cat dead, dead. Never mind. So, how's my mom? She's on the roof. But thankfully that Paul made it down from the roof, and I met Paul back in 1985, and he was part of the ministry in Crossroads in Portland, and one of the ministry I noticed that he's involved in the bus ministry, and his primary goal is not only to run the bus ministry, but also he's a mechanic, keep those buses going. I think there's like 3 or 4 big buses. And what's interesting, when I met Paul Douglas, he was at the period of time of retirement, or at least thinking about retirement, but not full. He decided to seek God and said, what else can I do? Well, 30 years ago, Paul decided to go to Africa. And he used his talent as a mechanic. I think the first trip he made in regard to help the engine for the hospital or working on a mortar. And that was 30 years ago. Today, he's going to tell us the rest of the story. So what happened after his first visit? So some men look forward to retirement. Others, we did keep on serving. And here's Paul, he's 91, and he's still serving. So we'll get to hear the rest of the story. Now, last month, most speakers, I told them they got a good hour, question and answer. And of course, last month was an hour and a half, 2 hours long. So Paul, I'm going to raise my hand when you got 5 minutes. Whether he get done, that's his control. So, but I'm glad he's here. Paul and I have a unique hand greeting. He doesn't shake hand, he just likes to bump into me. Something to do with he got a whole bunch of brothers in his family. So, all right, Paul, it's all yours, and share your vision. See, did it again.
No, I had 8 brothers. 8 brothers. I don't know how to tell the guy I love him. And so that's the only way I know is just slug him on the shoulder to assure him that I still love him. I have a lot of roots into the church in Minnehaha. Lee Turner was the man that started the work here in Minnehaha. How many years ago, Charles? 72? 72 years ago?
Wasn't that fun, but it was a while. It was a while.
When I was 19 years old, I lived in Stevenson, Washington, up the gorge, 25 miles. And those 8 brothers weren't angels, for sure. Lived rough lives. All of them were drunks. I'll just leave it there. But you know, well, such as, what kind of a face do you have when you're drunk and you get a cut down across your face and down through your throat, and they just kind of close it up because you're going to die anyway? And he had to live that way the rest of his life. And uncles, alcoholics. And I said, I don't want to go that way. He took the telephone one day, and I called one of the leading men in the Minnehaha church over in Portland, because I'd met his son had come to visit me up in Stevenson. And I said, I want to know something about Christ. And so I went to his home and listened to what he had to say. And I said, that's what I want to do. Decisions are made. And so what do? Go to church the rest of your life? No thanks. Do you know, let me leave this statement. This is the title to the other message that I could have preached this morning, but I chose not to. And I'm not preaching, I'm just telling you a history. But you know that God does not use anybody that does not prepare for the job. Think that one over. And I'll reinforce that several times today, but I'm not going to preach that. But you know, in 1946, let me get down to business. And by the way, as a lot of preachers say, that I've heard a lot of preachers step down out of the pulpit and say, that's my last sermon. Because the heart can only take so much so long. And if you've seen the lightning flash across the sky to where back in the back of the heart and into the spinal column, and it's just like a lightning storm. And the old preachers, they know they better quit it. I haven't come to that place yet, but close. But I want to tell you some things that have happened with major decisions in life. That in 1946, there was a man that come from San Jose Bible College, had an old Model A Ford, chug-a-plunk, came in to Portland in the middle of the night, knocking on the door downstairs, because the family that was teaching me what Christianity was, Lee Turner knew that family would help him also. So he was knocking on the door. And so the church in Montevideo said, we want you to go over to Minnehaha and get a church started over there. And so that's what Lee Turner did. How many of you know Lee Turner? Half of you. He was a very brilliant man. And I'm not going to, maybe he is still alive.
Yes.
But he hardly can get out of his room over on 102nd. But my roots go deep here. because I would come over here with Lee Turner and up here at the Grange Hall, find some people that wanted to be Christians for the roots of the church here, and to teach them the scriptures. Charles Daly came into the Nebraska, and he had a memomatic, which was a book where just one letter would lead you into one place in the Bible. And so this was way back in this 50s, 1950, or maybe it was in the first half of the last century, if it went back more than 50 years. But Charles has always been a good student. And so there was a day that I came over to Monteville, or over here to Minnehaha, and Lee Turner by that time had gone into Pakistan to be a missionary. There was a war with India, and the airplanes come in and strafe the airport, but the bullets would bounce and go through the medical clinic that Lee Turner had, helping people not only as far as preaching the gospel, but have a heart for the people to help them. And so I went over there, and I can remember standing holding, and this here, listen guys, I was standing holding onto the doorknob at Charles Daly's house, and I said, if anything I can do, boy, that's opening up yourself, I would sure do it. Next morning, my telephone, pardon me, sir, but I picked up my telephone, and there's Charles saying, get your passport and get your shots, you're headed for Pakistan. And so away I went to help Lee over there. And so those roots go back into the church here at Monteville. Monteville, I get the names mixed, but anyway, here at Minnehaha. But I was a member of the church over in Monteville for a long time. But always, you know, and the church has a very good history, but it needed some help when you bought the property over by the freeway. And so you were struggling. And so I took time out for a little 4 years, I think it was, and attended over here to help the church get back on its feet again. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that I've tried to prepare myself to where that I'm not afraid to step into anything. Right now, anybody here that loves VWs, Volkswagens? Ha, good. Hey, let me digress just a jiffy for Randy's sake. That I have a Volkswagen pickup that they call a caddy, which carries the golf clubs to the golf course.
Oh.
And that's where it gets its name. Maybe because it's kind of like a Cadillac. Okay, I believe that. But it's a little diesel truck, front wheel drive. Gets 50 miles to the gallon. And I put fuel in mine every year, whether I need it or not.
Oh.
But I don't drive it very much. I keep it in my garage, and my good car sits out in the rain. But then for the last year, I've been working on a 78 Volkswagen four-door, and I towed it home because it hadn't had a license on it for 20 years. It has been sitting in a cherry orchard with the wheels sunk down in the dirt, And so I hooked onto it with my pickup and pulled it out of the hole that it was sitting in. And what I'm trying to tell you is that I might be 91, but I'm not dead. And so yesterday, I finally towed it home from the body shop where I do the work. And oh my, life is so full of stories. But it has base coat, and then it has a clear, 5 coats of clear coat, and it shines like a diamond. But it still doesn't have the grille or the headlights or the any other door handles, all that. And so strip it down and do it. It isn't an Earl Scheib job. It's a good paint job. And so maybe I'll drive it over here next time. But today it hadn't been licensed for 20 years. And so that's what I like to do, but that's just what I've done all my life. And so I had my roots in the church here. Let me tell you the sequence of some things. It's been a tough life. Sam says he faces the loss of his wife with cancer. Well, yes. But you know, have you ever heard of penicillin? Our little 5-year-old girl, the doctor didn't know what penicillin would do. When penicillin was first invented in the 70s, I'll say, we wanted to go to a church rally up at Boise, but my little girl had a sniffle, cold. She was okay. Penicillin was marvelous. But they didn't know that it would kill a little 5-year-old. And so those things, that was a tough day. But to see somebody die that is your own little child, with her eyes popping out of her head, and wrenching and twisting, and the undertaker come and carry her out of my house. That body's mine. Do you see where I'm going with that? But why would God do that to me? But God had a reason. I went upon my way. I could have owned Dr. Master John's home up there overlooking the Pacific Ocean today in court. But he drove to Portland and got a little casket, and we buried our little daughter. Tough blow. But then there were 5 of my brothers that died in 1 year. And I was the preacher, and they didn't know Christ. And so they would ask me, will you preach the funeral? Try that for size. But God had a reason. And my mom and my dad stand and watch them die. Where am I going? The day is going to come when God was going to open up a door and say, will you go to Sudan? And where you see death, where people are run over on the street and blood running across the road. And And the family, under tradition, cannot pick up the body till sundown. Strange country. And so, what was I doing in Sudan? I said, I will go to Sudan. If I had somebody get me a glass of water, please. I didn't bring my caffeine. I got my Diet Coke out in the car. But, you know, I went there to repair hospital equipment. Spent 30 years over there. Well, it's 30 years overseeing the work over there, but lived there for several years at a time. I appreciate that. I mean, this is just plain water, isn't it?
Yeah.
No caffeine, bummer. You got to expect that of a 91-year-old. Okay, back, but you know, I was there in Sudan repairing hospital equipment, and part of my job was working with the doctor when he's got the fella opened up, working on his heart, and I'm in the operating room with him, keeping his equipment going. And I look back on those things and it's amazing. Why would I allow myself to be there if I hadn't seen my daughter die and my brothers die and hold my hand of my dad as he died? And so God was preparing me for a time ahead instead of saying, I'm out of here, I'm gone. That I've seen so many people give it up. But God had prepared me for these things. Okay, I'm a gory guy, I guess. Should I be talking about these things? Well, all of us face it. It's appointed for man once to die. And death isn't an easy thing under the best of circumstances. But God, Jesus Christ himself, came down here upon earth and lived and died to show us how to die. And so we have a Savior that has covered every phase of our life. Why did I go to Sudan? I was 60 years old, and I wanted to retire. I had a good job with Daddy Tonkin, and that was Marv Tonkin's daddy, and Ron Tonkin. All of those people are dead, but they were the big car dealers in Portland. You know of Tonkin Motor. I walked off one night on my way home it started on my way home from Minnehaha at a revival meeting here, and Mrs. Shoemake, the folks that helped me become a Christian, said, Paul, have you ever considered going to Bible college? That's a major decision, but you aren't going to step in behind a pulpit unless you have had some training. And so I said, yes, I'm leaving in 20 minutes. And I drove all that night to San Jose, California to go to Bible college. From that time on, I had my focus on a ministry somewhere. But then that was in 1945, 70 years ago. or something like that. And so I've had ministries that I wrote down where in the summer of 1949 I decided I would leave San Jose and go to Ottumwa school in Iowa. And so I took a ministry in Superior, Nebraska. And I knew every family in the town of 3,000. And even the Buick dealers started coming to church there in Superior. And I had a good influence. But then there was a big church that said, boy, we've heard what Paul is doing. We want him to come to Cozad. And so I went to Cozad, and there was a bunch of fighting men up there that couldn't get along with each other in the church. And so I was a fireman, putting out fires between arguing people. And I was in a ministry there for 4 years and decided that I would go to Pennsylvania and take Urdu for a language so I could go to Pakistan. But Lee was already there. Lee was preparing to go. And so I preached there at Cozad. I went back to Pennsylvania and went to school there in the University of Pennsylvania. And so, man, you know, I look back on my life with 22 years of schooling. And people in the church, leaders in the church were saying, what is God going to do with Paul? You know, and that might have been one of them. But your daddy, but different ones that have wondered what God was going to do, but even I didn't know what my real calling was going to be until finally one day when they said that somebody needs to go to Sudan to prepare or to repair hospital equipment. In the meantime, I had a Master of Science degree in education from the University of Nebraska. And so I said, well, yes, it looks like I am the guy that is prepared to go. And so I said, yes, I will go. I wanted to put a highlight in a couple of things of working in a hospital surgery room with a primitive hospital that had been built by the British, and then it left in 1953. They pulled out, and Sudan said, we can handle it. And so here is a doctor that has a football. No football game there, but he has ether in the football. He has injected ether into the football, and he has a man cut open, and I'm there keeping his equipment running. And when the guy would squirm a little bit, slap the football. Okay. You think I'm making that up? I'm done. I'm out of here. Except I saw my loved ones. I saw so much death firsthand. And yet, that's when others have said, I'm out of here. I'm going down to the bar and then try to drive their car home and slice their face open and live in, crazy life on outside of the church. But all of this time, my family, I didn't want to leave my family to go overseas. I didn't want to leave my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. But I said, okay, the need is great. And Jesus, our Savior, said, go into all the world. Make disciples of all people. And he prayed that the whole church would be one. That's not W-O-N-E. That's O-N-E. That the churches would be one. And if Islam keeps advancing upon us, as I saw those people that opposed Islam in Sudan, that was 100% Islam, and the well was 20 feet across and 50 feet deep, and if anybody opposed them, the well was full of dissenters. And is it going to be the day, Michael, in the day when churches are going to have to unite and be one in order to oppose a powerful enemy? And so I saw that, and I saw that vision as I worked there in the hospital, and I said, I'll stick with Dr. Noreen. And then it was just a week later that I was trying to keep the air conditioner going with 118 in the daytime on the equator, and to get the air conditioner functioning in the ICU with 11 people there, and 10 of them died that night. And I am the guy that's supposed to be keeping that air conditioner going. Dr. Noreen said, it isn't who you lose. We lost 10 of them last night, but we have one. We have one man alive. All through the night, they loaded those bodies onto the pickup and hauled them away. We weren't downtown. We were in poverty, in a poverty nation. And God had led me there. Let me tell you something. The president, first of all, let me establish, there's a man by the name of your new I met when I first went to Sudan. He was a senator that had come to the capital looking for help because an army had invaded his neighborhood. He had come to the capital to look for help, but found out that it was the capital that was there murdering his people. And so at that same time, here I am. Boy, that's a complicated story. But here I am looking for somebody to help me in Sudan. And so I spotted your new in a multitude of people, and I knew that God had that man ready for me. Your new has been the administrator of the church in Sudan for 30 years. Your new has been a man that God had ready, that was prepared to do the work. He wanted to preach the gospel. I sent him to Bible college in Zimbabwe. I went over into Zimbabwe and I sat in class with him for 1 year. And there were teachers that were teaching in English, and he knew English. He knew the Dinka language. He knew 5 languages and he could write them. He was very intelligent, and so that was the man that God had there ready for me. And so I taught him and baptized this man for the remission of sin, and he came up out of the water and he says, I want to preach the gospel to my people. Okay, he preaches the gospel, and the president of Sudan, 12 million people in South Sudan, he did the orchestrating or the arranging for those 12 million people to withdraw from Islam and become a Christian nation 4 years ago, to where that South Sudan is a nation that is patterned after the United States, on the good part of the United States. And so I sat under the tree outside of the church building where 1,000 people assemble and talked to the president. And he says, this is the most peaceful part of Sudan, right here in the Awil area. There are 5 million people here in this Awil area. This isn't my statement. Go talk to the president, President Kiir, that sits in the church building and listens to your new preach. And he says that 80% of our nation are Christians because of a little pipsqueak that wants to leave Portland and come over there and repair hospital equipment. I am amazed of what God can do when we say yes. I live in Gresham. I have watched leaders that were mighty men in the church that were the head of a Bible college. And they would not have leaders, or they would not let anybody take over their ministry. And that Bible college died with him. Nobody attends that college. I want to put that challenge before you men. It is just a matter of making the decision and preparing yourself. And you're too old. I was 60 when I decided to go to Sudan. And I didn't want to leave my grandchildren. 5 years down into the task, still over in Sudan, and here comes my grandchildren to follow me and my wife Marilyn. I didn't leave them behind. They came over and preached sermons to the Sudanese, and we're a challenge. And I remember Shane's message. It was simple. He had 8 pages. The first pages was a big if. It is to be. How many does that make? 5 pages? Then he pulled out his conclusion. It, just a great big it on that page, is up to who? Me. Say that, that's a simple message. And has guided my life. And if it's going to be, it's up to me. Say, yes, Lord, I will do it. That is my message today. I could tell you, okay, half of you have a computer, Charles says. And if you went to SAM, Sudan African Mission, SAM.com, you can be busy the rest of the day reading what it says about the Sudan African Mission. What has happened in Sudan that has become a Christian nation in the last 30 years with a couple hospitals, with a children's home, with women being taught to take over the work of the women. And they love to dance out in the parking lot and they'll go slap their hands, and they're going in a big circle. As the Negro people, very emotional people, black people. And so wait till Paul steps out there and gets in the circle and starts slapping hands with them, and they really pick up their tempo, and they are excited because I can be part of them. Just like I can be a part of the church here in Minnehaha. And I pray that the day comes when there is not the division amongst the many churches, but to be the one church. Time. And so I would leave it to you and your computer that you can see the progress. Amazing. That if there's 4 million people in South Sudan and 80% of them are Christians, how many Christians does that make? I didn't bring my calculator, but it goes into the millions. And so we don't lose heart in our work that when God opens the door for us to use that. Okay, let's open it up for questions. I know I left a lot of blank spots there. See how sharp you are now.
If my math is correct, is that 32 million? Did you say 40 million? 80% of 40 million?
No, 4 million.
Oh, 4 million. So it'd be 3 million
Don't
200.
exaggerate it, Dave.
Yeah, it'd be
Okay.
Well, it'd be 3,200,000 then. So that's a lot.
A lot of people.
Did I calculate that right, Randy?
That sounds right to me.
Yeah, see? He's a
And-
mathematician.
But you know, there are heartthrobs in that day when us white people had gone over and we take those black children that have big hips and big legs and are strong, and they come here as slaves with chains. Clank, clank, mom sees her boy leaving, clank, 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 and they hate our guts. And to see that woman coming out of the jungle and running right towards me, and I'm by myself out there in a jungle going down the road towards town, and I thought I was safe because there were so many Christians that surrounded me, and here comes that woman right at me. You know, she had her dagger and she was going to finish me off for taking her children, but she comes up and she can't speak a word of English, and I don't know that much of the Dinka, but I knew enough to get along. And she comes right up to me and she pats me on the chest, and she pats herself on the chest and she points God in heaven. She's telling me that she's glad that she's a Christian.
Yeah.
When you don't even know what she's saying. Okay? So yes, there's a multitude of people that have become Christians. And a good administrator works himself out of a job. I saw that brother Luke in the Bible college just let his Bible college go down the drain and with him when he died, dropped dead in Colorado Springs. And the church never, Bible college never. And for ministers right in Oregon that die and won't let even their own grandson in the pulpit because he might say something modern and let the church die. I don't want to go that route, and so I have my 5 directors that are all leaders in churches in the area here, and they know what the church is, and so they keep a tab. And even my daughter breaks all the rules of the church and tells of the heritage of my dad and the work in Sudan. And she's busy all over the United States telling of the work in Sudan. Somebody has to pull in $500,000 every year to support those hospitals and the doctors and pay their wages. It's amazing what God has done in Sudan. Okay? But yes, Charles.
Yeah, Paul, just for occasion, the website now is all one word, SouthAfricanMission.org.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a little change there.
Okay, we had to change it because we can't even went to Sudan because it's governed by Islam. We had to change it to South Sudan, even at the bank.
Paul, the word south is not in the actual address. It's when you get there, it says South Sudan, but SudanAfrican.org.
Okay.
Okay.
And that is what my email address is SAMP.Douglas@Comcast.net. And that SAM comes from Sudan African Mission Worldwide. Started in with a virtual big old long. Okay. Yes, that can be. You can research that, and then you can read all day on what is happening in Sudan, South Sudan. Okay.
Paul, if I remember way back, I always have a hard time pronouncing his name. You're new?
You're new.
He was the only one that converted to Christianity originally, wasn't he?
That's right.
And something that you're talking of has come about because of your teaching. You're new. And how many churches do you suppose exist over there now in South Sudan?
Right. Put 140 men through Bible college. There's 140 ministers that know the gospel. They run circles around me memorizing. We only see those with a full wage. But they have gone back home, and after they've been through Bible college for 3 years, they aren't going to forget Jesus Christ. They're back home farming, they're parent and making a living, taking care of their family, have their children, and but we just seldom make contact because no phones, no roads. But the church is still growing. Okay? If that answers your question, Randy, that your new has been he was a senator to start with. He was in charge of all the voting for 8 million people that chose to set North Sudan and leave Islam behind and to be a Christian nation. And I've sat with dozens of those. I haven't sat with them. I've knelt and held my hand upon their knee of those tribal leaders, that 5,000 people, whatever he says, I'm holding my hand upon his knee and talking with him, and he is in charge of 5,000 of his tribe. And he says, Paul, or I said to him, what can I do for you? He says, we need a hospital. My people are dying. I said, we will have a hospital. And so I came back home, and there was a man in Cheyenne, Wyoming, that I told him about the hospital that we wanted to build. I got a $24,000 check that week, and the next week it was $17,000. He said, sorry, I can't quite reach the $24,000 this week. And so He paid for the hospital. You want to know his address? He's the can man. He picks up aluminum cans. And he has a 20-foot trailer with 8 foot deep with chicken wire screen. And people come know what he's doing, helping the people of Sudan, throwing pop cans into that and to bring their cars of pop cans in. And he's the can man. You can find him on the internet also. He's still sending money. Amazing. Yes, you knew. I would tell him and leave for 6 months and come back. And God had opened up the door for him to build a trade school. And the government paid for it. But he learned how to build a church building. Because we would build those big huts with grass roof, and the rain would come and it would fall down. It worked okay for the family, but it did not work for the church. And so he worked for the government for 1 year and back into his ministry again. God's dealings. Okay. Still, he's 65 years old now. Okay? What else? Any other questions? Want to fill in the space?
When was the last time you ever fly back, Paul?
I run across the ocean like you run to Walmart, but 5 years ago, I turned it over to 5 directors, and they are doing a good job. Those directors maintain, like elders in the church here, if things go wrong, they correct it, but things go well. This might be my last sermon. It isn't a sermon, it just bring you up to date on what. Did you get the point of what you can do? And those decisive moments is the book that I'm going to write someday, I guess. But decisive moments of making the decision to follow what your mind can fathom and picture. I didn't know what all would happen when I went to Sudan, but God did. Okay? My time up. I hope.